This is CTO Insights, a podcast on engineering leadership. I'm Katerina, your host, and I will be bringing you insights from senior engineering leaders and experts on creating a culture of high performance. Today, I have the honor to host Ken Beck, one of the key people who shaped software engineering as we know it. Kent is the creator of Extreme Programming, or XP, and one of the 17 original signatories of the Agile Manifesto. He introduced test-driven development, software design patterns, and created JUnit. He's had a huge footprint on the industry, yet stayed so approachable and supportive of fellow engineers. As he says, he's driven by the personal mission to help geeks feel safe in this world. We can really admire the humbleness with which he talks about being in the room where Agile was coined as if it's something you do every day. In this episode, we discuss extreme programming and how it evolved organically from an intuitive approach for rapid delivery to a methodology that instantly made sense for teams. We explore the principles of XP along with practical approaches for implementing it within modern engineering teams. Kent highlights the importance of communication as a foundation for XP. Whether it's in the form of pair programming as it was originally intended, or simply connecting several times a day to drive progress together, he strongly believes that software engineering is as much a social endeavor as it is technical. We also talk about the cost of software and how balancing the design with feature development can improve the team's performance and ability to deliver new features quickly. I could easily extend this discussion for another hour. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. This episode is brought to you by Adiva, a global talent network that I founded back in 2014 that connects the world's best companies with the world's best tech talent. At Adiva, we provide access to a global network of top-tier tech and product talent ready to hit the ground running. With the ability to introduce a candidate within 24 hours and an exceptional 98% success rate on trial engagements, Adiva offers the flexibility for companies to scale their teams up or down as needed. If you're looking to expand your team, drive momentum in new projects, or need to backfill a role, Adiva might just be the solution you need. Visit adivart.com to get started. Kent, welcome. Thank you for accepting my invite to join me today. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Oh, Katerina, what a pleasure. I appreciated the invitation and looking forward to our conversation.
Great. I want to start with your personal mission, helping geeks feel safe in the world. When I first heard it, it felt something like it's not as common for someone in engineering to have a personal mission, especially something that is kind of focused on creating something or helping people be successful. How do you connect everything that you do and everything that you've done under, that purpose of yours?
Well, this happened probably 20 years ago, so it's 20 years into my career, and I had done a wide variety of different activities, and I thought, wow, there's just nothing that ties all of these things together. Patterns, testing, TDD, extreme programming. There's nothing, like there's no common thread there. But that bothered me because the common thread is, I did those things. So took probably a week of just kind of putting that question in the back of my head, what ties all these together? And that phrase in the middle of walking out in the forest popped into my head. I'm here to help geeks feel safe in the world. And I thought, well, I suppose, writing tests, people feel anxious when they make changes to code because they're not sure if they broke anything, and then writing tests help them feel safe. Oh, okay. And patterns are a vocabulary for design, so that if you and I have a conversation about design, we understand each other better and we feel that we understand each other better, and that helps us feel safe. And extreme programming is a whole set of rituals around interacting with other people in safe ways, whether that's pair programming or weekly planning or being able to ask business experts questions impromptu. All of those are help people feel safer in the world. At the same time, that word help is in there, meaning I can't make anybody feel safe, but I can help. So that lets me do what I can and let go of the things that I can't do along the way. And at the same time, I have to recognize that I'm helping myself feel safe along the way. I feel a lot of anxiety, still do, and I want to arrange my life in such a way that I can feel safe on a regular basis. So this isn't me coming down, looking down from the mountaintop. This is I feel these same things. I have these same struggles.
Helping others become safe while helping yourself, basically.
Correct.
Great. In terms of extreme programming, now let's start from there and explore where the conversation takes us. I want to touch on the origins first, and how did you you probably felt the anxiety of the project that was supposed to be delivered in a certain deadline, and there is a story about how it all came together. Can you tell me a bit about that, and then we can explore some practical experience from that particular first project, what changed over the years, how can people today benefit from extreme programming, especially in remote settings and all of that.
Okay, I'm going to let you hang on to that stream of questions because that's a 2 hour conversation right there.
Yeah.
And I'll try and answer the first one, and then we'll go from there. Um, so for probably the first 10 years of my career, I just tried to be a technical virtuoso. I thought if I just know more stuff about the computer, my projects will be successful. And it took that long for me to realize that I could be bad enough as an engineer to make sure that projects failed, but I couldn't be good enough as an engineer to make sure that projects succeeded. There's this core of you got to write some code, but then there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes around it, the context of writing that code, and that's where the that's another source of leverage for amplifying the value of what you do in that little circle, that's the part that I love doing. So I've been thinking about these issues for some time, and I was asked to consult on a project that was business critical, had been floundering, and the executives were starting to get nervous. So I came in, and after 3 days, I thought, this project will be fine, but they have to throw away everything they've done and start over. And so I made that proposal. For whatever reason, was told, yes, go ahead. I remember being on the plane on the way home, and my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't even drink my drink. I came back, and I had a series of conversations. Now, remember, at this point, I'd probably been trying different experiments around project structure for 10 years. I just started making stuff up in my conversations with the remaining people on the team. And the first person I said, okay, every 3 weeks, we're going to have running software, like really running software ready to go into production. And we're going to call that a iteration. I'm just making this stuff up. So the second person comes in, I say, okay, so we have these 3-week iterations. In each iteration, we're going to do some things that the users want, and we'll call those stories. Again, I'm just making it up. By the time I talked to everybody on the team, by the end of the day, I had extreme programming laid out, all of the words for things, all the basic concepts. So extreme programming is this deliberately social style of software development. And you say social to geeks and they, how am I going to do that? The thing is, it's set up for lots of different people with different perspectives, neurotypical, neurodivergent, different backgrounds, to be able to have safe personal interactions. Sometimes it's with another programmer, sometimes it's with a domain expert or a real user, but we're going to arrange things so that there are more of those interactions. Because one of the basic principles I discovered was the more people interact and the more diverse those interactions are, the better projects go. Now, you can have toxic people, you can have incentives that cause, that push people in the direction of blaming or finger pointing or shame. Yes, but in general, if I just hide in my little cave and write my little code, things are not going to go well. So how can we structure the interactions on this team so that people can interact in a positive way? That's the goal. It's also highly technical in the sense that as an engineer, you need to be prepared to do all of your work a little bit at a time. So if you're designing, you're going to design some every day. If you're architecting, you're going to architect some every day. If you're monitoring deployment, you're going to do that every day. If you're integrating, you're going to integrate every day. If you're testing, you're going to test every day. If you're planning, you're going to plan every day. All those things go from being phases, which doesn't really work well because there's not a lot of feedback, to becoming activities, and all those activities are happening in parallel, which requires superior technical skills. It's not like this is easy. But the promise is you're building this sports car that can go fast around corners. And if that's valuable, then it's worth the effort to work in this style.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does. And I have a lot of follow-up, so
Oh, good.
just utilize this pause and we'll start. First, you mentioned when you started consulting on this project, you told them throw it all out and we'll start over, and that's how you started inventing everything on the spot. Would you do the same right now? Like, would you say with all of your past experience, would you ask them to throw it all away, or have some different approach to continuing the project?
Well, there's always a balance of value between exploring new techniques and extracting value from techniques that work. And so it depends on the kind of project. So I'm working on a couple of AI-based projects now, and it's entirely invent everything from scratch because there's just so many unknowns and things are changing so fast. If I was sitting down to develop, I was about to say, if I was going to do testing, I would just do it in ways that I know work well, except it's maybe not. Maybe, I mean, the large language models really do change the cost benefit landscape dramatically and increase the value of that exploration style.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to be on the exploration side of things. I want to find out new stuff. I get bored doing things the same old way. So yeah, my bias would be towards inventing new stuff.
I guess
Sorry, go ahead.
I guess my question is, if, for example, you're now consulting someone in a, I don't know, banking software or something, they have a legacy app, it needs to do certain things. Additionally, they want to include TDD in the process and everything. You can't just throw it all out, and I'm guessing you wouldn't suggest to throw out complete modules of legacy code that is working. How would you approach that type of scenario?
Well, uh, my day job now is as a chief scientist for a startup called Mechanical Orchard that exactly replaces legacy systems.
Hmm.
And our what distinguishes our approach is that we do it one piece at a time. Anytime you try and draw a boundary around a big system, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that you're not aware of, that you don't know, and trying to replace it all at once just results in disaster after disaster. And sometimes those are technical factors or business factors or people factors. There's a lot of people inside the boundary of any system. So there's a lot of value in drawing little boundaries, re-implementing that, but integrated into the existing system, re-implementing another piece,
Hmm.
another piece, another piece, another piece. But it requires some serious technical skills to make that work, because you're syncing data up and moving data back and forth and control back and forth, and you have to observe both the old and the new system and operate the old and the new system at the same time. So it's not easy, but if you can achieve it, the risks are so much smaller that you eliminate the risk that you're just not going to get anything out of the project at
Hmm.
all. So uh, legacy is different in the sense that you're not worried that nobody's going to use this system when you're finished, as opposed to product development, where that's your first risk, is just nobody's ever going to
Right.
care at all. So that it does shape development to a degree, and we adapt, but would I do things completely like, I'd be excited at the thought of doing things completely different, and let's just throw everything out and try at it again. But that's not necessary. I mean, that's me getting my own needs met, not necessarily what I
Right.
would do if I was investing in somebody else's company and they told me they were doing that. I'd be a little bit nervous. Yeah.
Mm. How do you like if we talk about extreme programming in a more traditional company or organization that has maybe multiple teams and they rely on processes a lot? How would you convince someone to explore it?
I Trying to convince people doesn't work well at all. I spent probably 5 years right after XP came out trying to convince people to do it. And
How would you
um,
pitch it, maybe? I don't know. How would you explain them the value of?
I would ask them the most effective. This is the most effective technique that I know, and it's stolen from something called appreciative inquiry, where you focus on positives and try and spread them around. When I ask executives at large corporations to describe their best ever development experience, these are people who with 30-year, 40-year careers. They always tell me some story about there was tons of pressure and we thought we were going to fail. And so we put ourselves in one room and we had the user sat right next to us and we deployed, once an hour and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what we're proposing to do. So I'm not trying to convince anybody
Right.
to do anything new that they haven't already experienced. I'm just saying, yeah, let's take that goodness and spread it around the organization
So you
and
believe that
see
it
what
can
happens.
be done in any organization, regardless of the size or the process or the bureaucracy?
No, no. We've seen it fail too many times, um, and it's a values mismatch. So extreme programming is the foundation is communication, feedback, courage, and respect. And there's many organizations that value the opposite of all of those factors. And if your organization values the opposite of those factors and you rely on communication, feedback, respect, and courage, then you're going to look weird. and the organization is going to get rid of you, even if you have superior results. All the teams have tons of bugs and you don't have bugs, and other teams can't estimate delivery dates, and you hit all of your dates, and other teams have unhappy programmers and churn, and people want to volunteer their time to come work with your team. Even if all those factors which seem like success are in place, over and over again we just saw whole teams get fired in spite of achieving the apparent goals, the visible, the surface goals, because they just looked so odd to the rest of the organization. So no, not every organization can work this way. Every organization has the potential to work this way, but it's going to take a cultural transformation in order if you want the keys to the car,
Right.
to this race car, you have to pay for those keys. And at this point, I'm just not in the business of convincing anybody to try it. Somebody, they do, they don't. It doesn't change my life at all.
Mm.
If somebody comes to me and says, "How can we do this?" I have lots of opinions, and oftentimes the answer is, "Yeah, but we don't want to do that." Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
It does, yes. I mean, it makes sense because a lot of times you hear a lot of people saying this wouldn't work in our organization because, and there are a lot of kind of caution points. If you want to implement extreme programming, you can, but in these cases, it might not work as well. And I'm guessing what you just described in terms of the values and communication and how you want to work and what you focus on, these are the areas where it doesn't work as expected. It's not because of the organization's size or the size of the project that they're working on, or whether it's an early stage or a mature product. It's more about the values and the communication and what you
Yeah.
focus on in terms of delivery. Yeah. Now, keen to hear the other thing. Like if someone asks you, how can we implement it? You have tons of opinions. What are those?
So, so something I wanted to add is extreme programming focuses on a certain scope, like maybe 20, 25 people, 5 to 25, a scope like that. What do you do when you talk to an organization with thousands of people in it? And extreme programming doesn't say anything about that explicitly. Having teams that can work and produce reliable software on a regular cadence is a resource if you're trying to coordinate thousands of people, but you can still have organizations with 1,000 people that are structured in a way that just doesn't matter how fast the individual teams are going, because there's so many dependencies between teams and no way to resolve those dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
And there are misaligned incentives, and there are long batches of work. I had a conversation, excuse me, this morning with somebody, and they were bemoaning the fact that this other team didn't want to collaborate. They just wanted a specification, and then they implemented the specification, but they did everything all wrong, and they weren't interested in feedback. And I was like, okay, but those people are responding to their local incentives. It's not that they're idiots. They don't meet your needs, but they're doing what they think is right given the incentives that they're facing. So I think that was something I didn't realize 25 years ago, was that organization at the layer of multiple teams is really critical to the experience of the individual teams. I'm happy still to focus on how do you get 5 to 25 people working in harmony, but there is another layer above that. So if people want to try stuff, Uh, it depends on which people we're talking about. So there are executives who look at this who are fed up with fighting fires, and they're fed up with the lack of transparency, and they're fed up with the lack of options and the long cycle time between changes to input and changes to output. It's tough to initiate that. The partnership that definitely works is an executive who wants the benefits of extreme programming and engineers who want the experience of extreme programming. If you can get those two things in sync, then you really have something. But if an executive I've seen cases where teams were delivering software every 6 months, and the executive comes and pounds on the table and says, no, there will be new software in production every month. It's a disaster because the teams just aren't ready for that. They're doing stuff in phases. They produce so many errors that those monthly deployments are just a disaster, and you end up getting less accomplished. So you can't just push it. You can't just bubble it up magically from the bottom. It needs to be a partnership.
What's a good practice of teams, like independent teams doing XP within an organization, but then at times they depend on each other, or they have something, working on something interdependent? What's a good practice of communicating between teams in a larger organization or cascading down?
It's always going to be frustrating. That's the first thing, is just to recognize we can change direction every week and you change direction every 6 months. So we're going to want you to change more frequently than you're going to want to change. Mm. And from the other team's perspective, like, stuff's just changing all the time. There's nothing to count on. When are you going to be done? Great question. With what? Well, we don't know exactly. Oh, well, let's write it down. We still don't know exactly. Even if you write down everything you know today, you still don't know exactly what you're going to wish you had 6 months from now. Guaranteed. Yeah. Stuff's going to change. External stuff's going to change. Internal stuff's going to change. The team's going to change. So there's just always going to be friction at those points. And acknowledging that and choosing to partner anyway, and say, okay, well, we're going to frustrate each other, but we need each other in this case. Okay. All right. It's not going to be perfect, but is better than whatever the alternative is.
Now, what if both teams work, like, align with the XP values and everything? They are iterating constantly, and they have related features they work on, but both of those change at the same time. How can we balance this and make sure that the full expected functionality comes out as expected?
Yeah. Well, the full I kind
as
of don't
expected. I think that's not the word.
Yeah, it's not going to be what you expect. You just said everything changed, so it's going to be something different. How do you avoid stepping on each other's toes? How do you avoid interfering with each other? Say, my team's delivering some service that your team is going to need, and then my priorities change dramatically. Okay, so there's just going to be tension. There's just going to be tension because our incentives now have diverged. Instead of being, we want the same thing, now we want different things. Okay. So what's the best that we could do in this situation? Well, if we felt like, we got enough time, it's not a panic, it's just a change, then I blur the boundaries between teams fairly readily. It's important to have teams and have belonging and know who your tribe is and that kind of stuff. But it's also really valuable to blur the boundaries to a degree. So I say, all right, well, there's this feature and you really need it, and we were going to implement it. And now we're not going to implement it anymore. So for the next 2 weeks, two of our engineers are going to meet with two of your engineers, and they're going to get as much of it done as possible. And at the end of it, you'll be ready to take over responsibility for this feature because you don't want to be blocked. And our teams trust each other because we have tests. We don't mess around with the tests. We don't. Some people, when a test breaks, they just delete the test, and it's just like, I don't understand. You you you're so close. You almost could trust yourself, and now you can't trust yourself anymore. So we're not going to do that. Your team is going to work on our code, but that's better than you being blocked. And it's better than us not being able to pursue our new priorities. And so, yeah, we'll gently transfer responsibility for this feature to you. Are you happy about it? No, you're going to go slower than you would have. You're going to now be doing work that you didn't expect to do, but it's better than being completely blocked. So that's the kind of thing. I want there to be, I want people to flow between teams. You know, you work on, somebody works on your team for 2 years and then decides, oh, I'm really interested in what Kent's team is doing. I'm going to go join them. Maybe after one of these, we work together for a month kind of stints. So there's that kind of circulation of people between teams. And then there's these temporary task forces, a smaller team that blends multiple other teams to complete a particular task. And that's messy. It doesn't look, it kind of violates the org chart. You say, well, why aren't all of your people working on your stuff? Well, what percentage of time should people be working on their team stuff? Maybe 60%. And if we're engaged in it, we're giving gifts to each other, right? My team is not going to get credit for this feature that your team needs anymore because we're not going to implement it, but we're going to gladly gift a couple of our engineers for a couple of weeks to get you guys up to speed. Because that would be rude to just say, no, we're not implementing your feature, and now what do you do?
Yeah.
So it's going to be software engineering management seems like it's optimized for tidiness, for like how easy it is to draw the diagrams. I remember a phrase I heard one time, is that OKR work? And I just almost exploded. As if it's not part of some official OKR, you shouldn't be doing it. That can't be true. OKRs capture a tiny slice of what we should be doing to create value. They can't be comprehensive, and they shouldn't be comprehensive. Right. They don't change fast enough. That maybe the objectives are more stable than the key results, but still, we're not like, what is the duty cycle? What's the 50%, 30%? There's some number, depending on how much things are changing, where, yeah, you should do things that you said you were going to do. Some percent of your time should be doing that. But if stuff's changing and we're not changing in reaction to that, then we're leaving money on the table.
Yeah. Makes sense. It circles back, I mean, again, to the values and how you approach everything within the company. I want to talk a bit about Scrum because Scrum is agile, it's iterative, it has a lot of these things, like it's not something we are predefining well up front. But then again, a lot of teams have this love-hate relationship with Scrum. A lot of teams complain about sprint spillover and things changing, or things that are not in the sprint coming as a priority, and then the team needs to shift focus. How And on the other side, like engineers, even sometimes, as you mentioned, are there on board or not for XP or whatever other more collaborative approach of development with stakeholders. A lot of times, engineers are also reluctant to something that doesn't have a strict process because I don't know, maybe they don't feel as safe. So how would you approach all of this? Like, how would you make agile more agile with XP within teams, and then also how do you get people on board?
So the whole agile, that's not my. I don't find that a helpful framing anymore because it doesn't. The word
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything anymore. And I hate to say I told you so, but I did in the meeting. I did say this word agile. Everybody's going to want to say that they do it. People complain about extreme programming. Oh, it's like bungee jumping with a computer or whatever. Here's the thing about that brand is if you haven't worked really hard to become an extreme programmer, you're never going to say that you are one. So it's defensible. Agile, everybody wants to be agile. Nobody wants to be rigid. That's awful.
Mm-hmm.
So um, there's some great things about, I mean, we could talk about Scrum probably all day. They did some stuff really right. There's some things I really don't understand and some things I really don't like about how it was marketed and sold. Um, can you ask a more specific question?
Like, let's say my team is doing Scrum and we are facing issues with deliveries, sometimes facing issues with urgent requests coming from customers or stakeholders, priorities changing, planning is not as, it's more, it's changing basically. As you said, planning every day, that's more close to what happens than having a fixed roadmap and then planning the 6 months up front and knowing the sprint cycles and all of that. So basically what I'm trying to ask is, we have a kind of traditional Scrum team that maybe does Scrum right, maybe they don't do Scrum right, and that's what's wrong. But the results are not visible. So we have story points that are very unintuitive, and estimations that are not accurate, and then things enter the sprint but they are not delivered. A lot of times these are issues with a lot of teams that are using Scrum, and
Okay.
what I'm
So,
asking is how we can.
yeah. Okay. You're probably not going to like the answer, but if you're not getting everything done in a sprint, plan to do less.
Simple as that.
I, I that's the first thing to do.
Yeah.
Here's the feeling. Here's the feeling that you want. And first, 1 week, not 2 weeks, please, please. And if you can't accomplish anything in 1 week, then figure out why you can't accomplish something in 1 week and fix that. You'll have already made progress. But
Before we
just
continue, what's the reasoning? 1 week.
oh, I mean, there's bottlenecks in the development process for sure. Too many bugs or tools that take too long to run, or code review process that leads to long batch and queue behavior, multitasking. Just like anyway, for an XP team, somebody saying, "Oh well, we can't accomplish anything that users care about in 1 week. We need 2 weeks." It's just absurd. that just sounds like I don't know what. Anyway, so yeah, the solution if you're not getting okay, so here's what you want. And that's why I got off on the 1 week rant. On Monday, you want to sit down together and go, all right, what's the most important thing for us to work on this week? And on Friday, you want to be able to lean back and go, yeah, okay, here's what we did. Here are the interruptions that came in. Here's how we handled those. How did we prioritize this? How'd that go? What were the friction points? How, for the interruptions that we got, are there bigger lessons that should shift our priorities in the future? But every week you should have this. Maybe I should start with the weekend. On the weekend, Saturday, you should wake up and go, feel good. Well, what am I doing with my family, with with my hobbies? And then about Sunday, maybe about 2:00, you're like, hey, I get to go to work tomorrow. And the juices start flowing, and you're like, all right, I'm not going to work now. I'm not going to look at my email because I don't need to. But man, Monday morning, you're ready to just take a bite out of it. That's the feeling that I want. And then you say, what's the most important thing for us to work on this week? And then Friday comes and you sit down together and you go, hey, how'd that go? What did we accomplish? What lessons did we learn? Everybody have a great weekend. And you feel satisfied, like a meal. You've had dessert. You feel good. You don't need this urge to like, let me just do 2 hours of work on Saturday. Like, no, you're ruining Monday if you do that. That's the cycle that I want.
Okay.
Where I know that I'm working on important stuff with a bunch of people who share my goals. And every Friday I get to feel this sense of satisfaction. Now, there are plenty of companies, there's styles of leadership, even, let me say, that see satisfaction as a failure. If you're satisfied, then you've failed. People need to be afraid. People need to come to Friday and just like, oh, God, if only I could have done some more. So if you're in an organization that's run on that kind of fear, then Scrum spillover is just your organization doing exactly what it wants to do. It believes that fear is the way to achieve the most. It's not. That's a reflection of somebody else's fears. That's not the reality of it. It's entirely possible to sit down with a group of people who share a goal and feel satisfaction every Friday, to feel excitement every Sunday night. That's possible. It's hard work. It's going against the grain oftentimes of organizations, but it's entirely possible. And that's the vision. I have people come to me on a regular basis and they say, from 2003 to 2005, I was on an XP team and it was absolutely the highlight of my career. I look back and that we got the most done. We had the happiest customers. We were making the most money. It felt great. And I want to cry when I hear that story. Why is that 3 years out of a career? That's just wrong. It's not good for anybody.
I love this. Especially the part like sprint spillover is what your organization doing what it wants to do. I mean, you've put it so well. Yeah. So on the practical side now, let's say the team is all aligned. They want to shift away to feel this, excitement on Sundays and satisfaction on Fridays, and work hard to achieve, to do everything that extreme programming promotes. What are the next steps? You set the week, you have the planning, like do less. Okay. Any tips about how can a team, like estimations, for example, are often a problem for engineers, and this is a lot of times because of dependencies or the code not being in the best shape, and everything coupled together and all of that. How do you what is your advice for engineers to estimate better and to take on work that they can reasonably do in a sprint?
Yeah, estimates. I always ask, who is going to use this estimate to make what decision? So if it's a week's worth, we can be very informal. We can say, well, what do we need to accomplish this week? Okay. So here's the thing. So the last team I managed, our process was we would list the things that we wanted to accomplish that week, and then people would sign up for the things that they wanted to own out of that list. And you weren't allowed to sign up for more than half of what you thought you could accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's
And
like
that
50%
means
buffer.
that half of your time is available to help other people, for interruptions, to take advantage of opportunities. Oh, this tool is slow. Let's just spend 2 hours optimizing it. So everybody's going to save a half an hour a week. Yeah. What a wonderful use of 2 hours. If you're signed up right up to the,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're not going to behave that way, because if you do, uh, then you're gonna fail, and everybody's gonna know it.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. Now I'm not suggesting that this is the process anyone else should follow. We made this process up based on first principles, and it worked really well for our team. Now we were 100% remote at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, every day we would have 2 hours of team time in the morning and the afternoon, and everyone's was expected to prioritize that time. You didn't have to be there every week or else, but that was blocked out on calendars. Meetings were not allowed to interfere with that. And so we'd get on Zoom all together and have kind of a conversation about, oh, how are things going based on what we wanted to accomplish this week. And then people would kind of split off and pair on stuff or work solo. We weren't different teams have different levels of collaboration, but there was lots of pairing going on,
Mm-hmm.
which has huge value to the team as a whole.
Do you
Um,
think an
yeah,
XP team can work without pair programming?
yeah. I think it's uh, what it can't work without is a couple 3 hours of conversation, and it's hard to sustain a day, and it's hard to sustain a couple 3 hours of conversation without typing,
Mm.
without getting code.
Yeah.
It's kind of that level of interaction and collaboration, because everybody is depending on everybody else.
So
So how do
async
you,
and extreme programming are not pairing well.
if you said to me, Kent, here's a project. Okay, so at Mechanical Orchard, we have projects that are split US and Europe. And we have a process for those projects that makes sure that there's a couple of hours of overlap in the transition. And that works okay. Purely async seems to me, so this is that there's a general trend, and I've seen this my whole career. How can we get people to interact as little as possible? Business people talking to geeks is uncomfortable. So how can we arrange things so that the business people don't have to talk to the geeks? And geeks talking to other geeks can be uncomfortable. How do we arrange things so that geeks don't have to talk to geeks? Oh, well, Jira. Everything has to be a Jira ticket is another way of saying, whew, I don't have to talk to these people anymore. It's in the ticket. Don't talk to me about it. And what I notice, and this is an uncomfortable realization for me, is that when I put myself in my little box and I don't talk to people, things go horribly wrong. So, yes, it may be uncomfortable for me to have social interactions, but I hate it, but I really need it.
Mm-hmm.
I need it for my team. And for me, yeah, it's actually, I can learn to enjoy interacting, even if that's not my natural.
Right.
I have friends and who are great at social stuff and really enjoy it and just energized. And I'm not one of those people, but this this is an investment that I'm going to make because it makes my team more successful.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about open source because I think a lot of open source projects are using maybe not extreme programming as it has been intended, but still a version of it. And it doesn't involve that much direct communication or calls or peer programming. So I believe it can be successful, but maybe.
Of course, that style of development can be successful. It's not like, oh, it's not XP, so it's not going to work. Not at all. That style can be successful within a certain scope.
Mhm.
And there are some big successful projects. There are big projects that go really slowly, seems to me, based on that. But people can drift in and drift out. You don't have the economics of the situation uh, twisting the incentives. So, and I've been involved in not big open source projects, but popular open source projects like
Mhm.
JUnit for years and years. And I enjoy that. Now, JUnit was, we, for years, not a line of code went into JUnit if it wasn't paired.
Wow.
And so we would just slow development down. If we couldn't get together, we just wouldn't implement stuff, even if it was really important and blah, blah, blah. If it was really important, then we'd figure out a way to get together.
Mhm.
So we ran it the way we wanted to for our own enjoyment, because that was going to be the only payoff.
Right. Okay.
Uh,
Um,
there,
mhm.
there's principles and techniques that certainly carry over. Continuous integration, personal responsibility for quality based on tests that
Right.
are effective and that pass. Uh, uh, an interleave between the features that you implement and the design of the system. You interleave the investment between those. That's very much an XP thing. It's also very much an open source project thing.
Mhm.
The
That
importance of tooling. Yeah.
that's what inspired my question. Basically, it's kind of like relying on a lot of the items of XP, but then not having that communication, direct
Yeah, not
communication.
not having kind of this kind of I was going to say intimacy, not in a
Hmm.
creepy way, but in a just like we know each other really well. We can finish each other's sentences after a couple of years. Yeah.
Right. I wanted to touch a bit on the tidy first approach, and especially it connected with the part where you said 50% is left for interruptions and any code improvements and whatever you think it needs to be done to support those 50% you sign up for. I'm guessing this connects with your vision about tidying first, and what's the approach there, and also what's the like the business case? What would you say to a manager to motivate them to invest time in this?
So Tidy First is the first in a series of books on software design. I published it last year. I started working on it in 2005. So 18 years. Here's the business case. Software development, generally speaking, is a series of disappointments. You think the feature's done, but it took way too long to implement. And then it goes out, and then there's a bunch of bugs. And then you have to recover. And then it gets popular and big, and it gets even slower. So there's the experience for, say, an investor in software is it's one thing after another. What would it take for software development to be, I don't have the exact phrase yet, but the present factory, for software development to be a source of happy surprises on a regular basis? Instead, what could you make more money with that? Would your career go better as an executive if you had software development that gave you happy surprises instead of just disappointments? Okay. So if that would be valuable and you want to make the investment necessary to create that, one aspect of that is that this interleaving of features and design, the behavior of the system and the structure of the system, you need to work on both of those for a while. Now, it's tempting from a product perspective to get all the features first, and we'll do that design stuff later, because these features make money or save money. They're very visible. All this design stuff, our technical debt is lower. Yeah, who cares? So don't do that. Deprioritize that. And the problem is that slows down the development of the features and creates these nasty surprises. So there's a geeky response to that, which is to take all this design stuff and let's do it up front and we'll just get the design right this time. But that has several problems. One is you're working without feedback. So you're likely to have a design that doesn't actually support the features that you want. So you end up implementing the features slower. And then just in a net present value, you're spending all this money up front and you're not going to earn until much later. So economically, it doesn't make good sense. So the empirical style that I start describing in Tidy First takes the features and the design and interleaves them. And it means that design goes slower than it could if you did it all concentrated. It means that features also slow down, except the design work that you do is informed by the feature. If I'm going to do this design, it's informed by the features that I've already implemented. So I'm going to be more effective at doing the design. And it's in preparation for this next feature that I'm about to implement. So this feature is going to go faster than it would have if I hadn't done this little piece of design. So that's Tidy First. It describes this moment for a programmer. There's some code. It's kind of messy. I have to change it. Should I tidy first? Should I take this, here's this feature. Do I do a little bit of design before I work on this feature? That's the question. And the answer is probably yes, but not too much. Don't get carried away.
Right.
And the reason that's the answer is all of this theoretical basis, the economic basis for software, whether it's net present value or the optionality embedded in the software, it's the technical basis, which is the reason that you get these nasty. One reason you get these nasty surprises is because I say, oh, I have to change this, but that means I have to change these two things, which means I have to change 8 more things, which means I have to change 100 things. And now it seems like a little feature, but it takes years to implement.
Right.
That's this propagation of change, which is exactly coupling. So what we're doing as we do our little bits of design in between implementing features is we're reducing the propagation of change so that when I come to the next feature, it's not going to be one of those nasty surprises. Instead, it's going to be a gift. Oh, no, we can implement that. We can have that done this week.
Mm.
Oh, wow, I thought that was going to take months. No, it's because you made that investment before you got to this feature. If you hadn't made that investment, if you'd said, "Oh, let's do that later," all of a sudden this feature is going to be a nasty surprise. So that's the business case. If it would be valuable to have happy surprises on a regular basis, then as an executive, you can encourage both the feature work. You want to celebrate the features that come out. No, we made this sale and we customer sent this happy note to us. But you, as an executive, you can also encourage that foundational work and celebrate it and make sure it's prioritized and recognized appropriately. Not this way. Not okay. The geeks can be in charge, but in a we're going to do a little of this and a little of that, and a little of this and a little of that. Does that answer your question?
Yep. I also remember in one conference talk you were talking about the cost of software, and which is equal to the cost of change, basically. So I think that's also another good business case, because if it's too expensive to change your code, the software as you go, as you implement new features, I guess it's much more expensive than investing some time upfront to optimize it.
I was with you until you said up front. It's worth it to invest
Uh,
time
uh,
as you go. As you
as you
go,
go, right? Upfront meaning before it actually happened, before that. I see what you mean. Okay, okay, yeah.
it's such a and I've been in this game long
So
enough to know. Oh, there's certain words that just
you just caught it, and
yeah.
I'm guessing this is the moment, like going too far with
Yes.
tidying. So if
Oh,
I,
because it feels so good. It
yeah,
just like there's some name and the name's just wrong and it's bugged
mm,
you, and then you realize the new name and you want to fix it, so you fix it here, and
yeah,
you want to go, oh, but there's 1,000 other places I could fix it.
right. And that's upfront. Like I'm investing now to make it easier
Yeah,
potentially later, but that might never come.
right.
Right.
So that's two changes, and I'm gonna take the next change and I'm gonna move it till afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'll be
Okay.
a little sad. Yeah, I want to fix this area. But then you get to Friday afternoon and you're like, oh, what we've accomplished enough this week,
Satisfied.
that now I can go and spend 2 hours just fixing stuff. But it's
Right.
not 2 weeks or 2 months,
It
and it's not interfering with the delivery of features.
mm, it makes a full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry I jumped on that, but
No, right on point. In one of your recent newsletters, you were talking about documentation, and I mean, I don't want to go too deep into that, but just there was a cycle you were mentioning that caught my attention about, what are the things that we think would improve development, but then they actually don't. And I will quote you here for a minute. Like you
okay.
say, just write a specification first, then development will go more smoothly. And then design up front, then development will go more smoothly. Have product people pick the features, hand them to programmers, then development will go more smoothly. Don't waste programmers' time with tests. Have a QA department test, then development will go more smoothly. We were talking about XP and how to avoid all of these pitfalls and everything. What I want to address a bit more right now is the role of product design in the whole process. We talk about planning daily. Is the design happening as we go together with the development? How do they integrate? The testing, I assume it's automated unless there is something specifically in the business case that requires more manual intervention, but just like to paint a full picture.
Yeah, so philosophically, when I was taught software engineering 400 years ago, it was very phased. You have this phase gate. You
Mm-hmm.
have the analysis and the specification and the design and the coding and then the testing, and then you were finished, which is already just wrong because now you've spent 1% of the money that you're going to spend on development. So
Yeah.
maybe we should focus on that. Anyway, it's these phases.
Mm-hmm.
And philosophically, what extreme programming does is turn all of those phases into activities. And that means all the phases. So yes, product decisions are going to happen a little bit over the life of the project. And design is going to happen a little bit over the life of the project. And architecture and testing and tool development and deployment and everything. And I had a conversation last night with somebody who was talking about designers, and designers wanted to work in Figma and produce pixel perfect, and then there was the programmer's job
Mm-hmm.
to replicate those pixels in the user interface. And it introduced so many bottlenecks, and the designers weren't happy because they were getting blamed for how slow things were, and the programmers weren't happy because it's like Code Monkey.
Mm-hmm.
So what they instead did was the designers produced CSS style sheets that the programmers would use in implementing the front end programmers would use in implementing the user interface. So there was a certain amount of consistency enforced by the CSS, but it was easier for the programmers to use that CSS than to just make stuff up themselves once they
Mm-hmm.
learned how to use it. Um, yes, you wouldn't get pixel perfect, but the application as a whole had a look and had consistency, the kind of things, the goals that you're trying to reach with design. If something came up that didn't fit into that framework, then there's this blurring of the lines. Have a designer and a programmer sit
Mm-hmm.
down together. Now the designer knows what to go off and do to refine the CSS and then communicate that to the programmer, and the programmer's unblocked and they can implement their feature. But it's a different style of design. It uses different tools. It eliminates the illusion of control, which people hate. Boo-hoo.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, everything. The more things change, the more valuable it is to turn the phases into activities.
Right.
So if things are changing enough, each phase is going to introduce so many mistakes that it just takes way, way longer to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just, okay, so turning all of those things into activities may be uncomfortable, but is way better than the alternative.
Right.
Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
Mm-hmm. It does.
Excuse me.
And one final thing, so we have the customer involved in the whole process, and we are releasing daily. What stage of the product, like when you're working on something more complex that cannot go out immediately, how do you involve the customer in that part of the process? Or is it some other environment, or is it like the product owner acting, taking the role of the customer?
That's an interesting one. The XP style is very much customer means customer. This is somebody who's
Mm,
using the system,
right.
maybe as a representative of other people who are using the system, but it aligns authority and responsibility,
Hmm.
right? You got skin in the game. Um, Even if you have a large user base. Um, so I'm sorry, I lost the thread. Ask the question again, if you please.
If you're working on something more complex where you cannot involve the customer immediately, or you cannot release anything visible in a day, let's say, how do you involve the customer? How long do you, so
Oh,
with XP
they've got
you
a
do,
yeah. The customer's got a day job. They're filing reports with the government, or they're answering phones with angry customers, or whatever it is.
mm-hmm,
So they need to be easily accessible, even interruptible. Hey, what happens when we try the filing and it fails? Does that ever happen? Oh yeah. Then we da, 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 da. Okay, thanks. And you're back and you're unblocked. Um, if you have something to do that's bigger, part of the technical challenge, the skills challenge as an engineer, is one, just being able to go fast so that you can accomplish more days, can have visible accomplishments, and you don't do that by going faster. You do that by wasting less time.
mm-hmm,
Um, and then the second part is there is a skill to slicing, user visible. Like, what if we just put a button there, but it's not connected to anything, and we just see if anybody clicks on it?
mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we can do. How long would it take? 15 minutes to do that. Oh, okay. Let's just try that. Once 3 people have clicked on the button, then we know that people will click on the button.
Okay.
So there, if your goal is to gather feedback, there are always ways of slicing big
Mm-hmm.
projects. If your goal is to have a successful a successful feature or a successful project, so that you can't imagine slicing it because everything is equal priority. Well, then you're not getting feedback. You make more mistakes. Your chances of eventual success go down. Maybe your organization rewards that kind of behavior. Okay, but that's not what I'm aiming for.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's always a way to slice it, in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you're working on, say, infrastructure work, okay, we were on this database and now we're moving from Oracle to Postgres. It's going to be a technical project. That's definitely one of these structural projects. And it's important to arrange that project so that we can continue to deliver features even as we're doing this migration.
Mm-hmm.
That makes this structural change harder.
Right.
Boo-hoo. We're trying to maintain a relationship with other kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
So even though our job gets a little bit harder, we're going to accept that so that we can continue to deliver features even as we're making these kind of structural changes.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense.
That's how I approach it.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, we actually know how to do this well. Our community knows how to do this well. And we choose not to use those techniques for reasons that make sense to people. I have to keep reminding myself. People don't write buggy code. People don't write messy code. People don't spend long periods of time doing design without feedback because they think it's the best. They're following the incentives that they're experiencing. But there are alternatives that would be good for the users, good for the management chain, good for investors, good for the programmers, the designers, the product people. There is a win-win out there. And it's available to everybody. It's not like it's going to require a PhD in abstract mathematics to achieve this. It's hard work. It's not easy. But if you choose not to do it, it's because you're choosing not to do it.
Mm.
Which is fine. I mean, it doesn't change my life at all. I'm a little sad, but
Mm.
Okay, the possibility of that gift factory, that oh, that's easy, oh, that worked, oh, that possibility is open to every development team, every development organization, every company that relies on software could be experiencing that on a regular basis.
You just need to be willing to put in the work.
Yep.
Thank you, Kent. And I must say,
Katerina, what a pleasure.
yeah, pleasure is all mine. It felt intimidating at first, and you made it feel safe. So I guess that's also another aspect of your mission, which is not related that much to software development itself, but in general, talking to people and being approachable and being able and willing to share everything that you've learned over the years. I mean, for me, it's been an amazing experience, amazing discussion, and I'm certain it will be like that for everyone who listens to this. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.